With everything you have going on in life, from growing a business, working full-time, taking care of your family, trying to work on your health, and just all of the toxic environments and people that we can be subjected to, no wonder why it's so easy to start going down the path of burnout. Having been in full burnout myself, I can tell you that this is actually a real thing. What I found for me personally is my solution to almost every single problem that comes up in my life is to work harder. So if I need to make more money, I need to work harder. If I need to prove myself, I also need to work harder. If I need to spend more time with my family, I've got to work harder and usually sleep less. And if I want to get my health under control, then I need to work harder, which means pushing myself more. But that only got me so far. Actually, it ended up getting me hospitalized and eventually diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called Crohn's disease, which I do not want for you. Which is why today we want to share the 7 ways that we found to stop burnout in its tracks or prevent it from even happening in the first place if you're way smarter than I was and want to get ahead of it. So if you're ready to do that, you're ready to attack burnout head on along with us, let's go. It's time to redefine leadership. Welcome to Modern Leadership, where we see things differently. Our channel is all about empowering entrepreneurs like you to achieve the next level of success in business and life. We believe that you can create a massive impact in the world without compromising your personal life or family time to do so.
We're committed to providing you with actionable tips and strategies weekly to make that possible. So if you're ready to become a modern leader and make a lasting difference in the world, consider subscribing. Turn on notifications and dive into our community. We want to thank you for being here because the world needs your leadership now more than ever. Let's go.
So what is going on, my people? Welcome back. Now, I do want to call something out, and that is thank you for being willing to lean in, to watch this video, to take action, and to really show up in a way that the world needs you now more than ever. I know that you have a heart of service, that you're wanting to give, you're wanting to make an impact, and you're willing to do things, whatever it takes, to make that happen. And I just want to acknowledge and appreciate you for having that heart. But there's another way to do things, a way that doesn't burn you out and actually gets you to show up in a way that you truly want to show up for the world and create the kind of success that you want to. And that's what we want to talk about here today. Now, recently I did this training for about 900 law enforcement officers who were also struggling with burnout. And the feedback that I got from the strategies and the ideas and the mindset that I talked about was a game changer. And I wanted to make sure that we got to share it with you too. Now, while we're talking about burnout, I think the first thing we have to do is defining what it is and what are the symptoms of burnout. So according to Google, burnout is a state of chronic physical and emotional exhaustion, often accompanied by doubts about the value of one's work or contributions. Now, when you think about that, it's kind of powerful because a lot of people that experience burnout, they're working too much. At least that was me, putting more action and more energy. And when you start to feel like it's all for nothing, like you're not making any progress, and like people aren't actually even appreciative of the action that you're putting in for it, it just really gets you to feel like, why am I even doing this? And it's very easy to go down that path. I know one that I traveled myself. Now let's talk a little bit about the symptoms because we have to become aware of when these things start to come up and of course be able to combat them, which we're going to share the 7 strategies with you in a minute. But you have to know that, hey, these are the red flags. These are the things where I need to pay more attention to.
Okay, so let's start with the physical symptoms. So number 1, you have chronic fatigue or you're always feeling drained. You have sleeping difficulties or you either have insomnia or you're oversleeping. You have a loss of energy and focus, or it's even hard for you to pay attention. Now, the emotional symptoms are feelings of detachment or alienation from others, a loss of motivation or passion for your job or business. Now, let's also talk about the kind of behavioral signs. So one is you're withdrawing from your responsibilities or you're procrastinating often. Maybe you're using food or drugs or alcohol as a coping mechanism. There's also a way that you're possibly neglecting your personal needs. So maybe you're skipping meals, you're overworking, or you're ignoring your personal health or well-being in favor of work.
Now, here's the thing. Everybody has their own personal journey towards beginning stages. Is usually overwhelm, leading into burnout. It doesn't mean that you have all of those symptoms, but some of those symptoms together is like a red flag, right? I know for me personally, neglecting my personal needs is the first thing to go. I sleep less. I skip meals. I don't eat. I work massive overtime. I don't even remember like a lot of the day because it's just, I'm constantly doing, right? And just adding more to my schedule. And that for me was my red flag.
And I also think it's kind of like you're trying to be the martyr. You know, you don't want to disappoint other people, but you're fine disappointing yourself and kind of neglecting your own needs.
Yeah, such a very key point. I know I used to wear my hardworking badge which is like, hey, I'm doing this for everyone else, but also I wasn't showing up the way that I wanted to, right? But we're going to give you some mindset shifts and some tactics in a minute. But we really want to like draw your attention to some of these symptoms to see if you're experiencing them now. And if you're not, perfect. I want you to continue to listen because all of these 7 strategies are going to prevent this from even happening. But if you do feel a couple of these come on, I want you to also recognize that, hey, it's time to pay some attention to these. So let's get into the 7 strategies right now. Now, I do want to say that like doing all of these at once is also going to create overwhelm. Remember, one of the primary reasons why we actually continue to go through the process of burnout is because we keep throwing more actions and taking more things on. That is not what I want to do. As a matter of fact, what you're going to hear today is simply removing some stuff will make you better at everything else. That doesn't mean that all 7 of these things you have to start implementing. I want people to pick one, see which one is going to be like the biggest difference and game changer for you, and just go all in with that for a couple weeks. And if that's working, you could just stick to it or even move on to a second one. But don't take all 7 of these thinking you have to do all 7. That is another recipe for continuing to experience more burnout. All right, so let's dive into strategy number 1, and that is focusing on self-care. Now, I know a lot of people might be watching this and going, really? And the answer is yes. But I want you to take a little bit of a perspective shift here because we're going to go into each one of these. We're going to dive into both the mindset and the tactics that it takes in order to implement these strategies. Because it's not just simply like, oh, just take more care of yourself. No, you have to find a reason why for you to take care of yourself. And when you can find that reason, then all the strategies we're going to talk about in a second are going to work. Now, what I like to think about when it comes to self-care is like what recharges and rejuvenates you. You know, there's a lot of YouTube videos out there about follow this routine and you have to do it this way. But I feel like we miss something because we're all a little bit different, right? So thinking about what are some of the things that actually rejuvenate and recharge you. I was actually speaking to a client the other day and she said that cleaning her house rejuvenated her. I invited her to come over so she can do some rejuvenation at our house. But in reality, it was like, that's crazy because that is not something that's actually going to help me. All right, so some of it for me would be exercise. Some people do meditation. Some people talk about hobbies, taking breaks, doing things with family, like finding things that recharge and rejuvenate them. Now, just knowing those activities is not going to be enough usually to actually get us to take action. So I want to ask you a few questions related to self-care to really help you tap into this. So number 1 is, when you recharge and rejuvenate yourself this week, what kind of impact is that going to make in everything else that you do? How are you going to show up now on an entirely different level and basically model the behavior for taking care of yourself to those you lead? Like a lot of times we don't realize that, but sometimes we teach people how to go through burnout themselves by us experiencing it and not like letting our foot off the gas. And so realizing that actually there's an impact that you're going to make here with yourself, with your family, but also with the world.
All right, so number 2 is boundaries, setting boundaries. So let's go over the tactics first. You want to establish specific hours for work, for family, and for free time.
I just want to call it to that for a second because a lot of people think that either number 1, all they do is set business time or work time. It's very rarely that we find people set time for their family, but I almost never see people set free time. Like setting time on your schedule to play Xbox, setting time to go on a walk, setting time to go to Ulta. I know I got to keep getting that in. But it's like when you find that things recharge and rejuvenate you, you've got to figure out like, how do I set boundaries around that? Well, you make it just as important as your work time. You make that time off just as important in your calendar. You make the fact that you want to tell your kids that you love them, and maybe it's something you're not good at remembering, but you put it into your calendar anyway because you know it's really important to you, right? So I feel like so many people struggle with that part about boundaries because they don't take what they've learned in business and in their personal like career and move it into their family life, but also when it comes to like just not doing anything for yourself, just scrolling social media. What would it feel like if you put like time on your schedule that said, this is the time I mindlessly scroll social media? Well, it would probably prevent you from doing it right now because it's business time. And instead, you would now have a time on your schedule to actually do that.
I think sometimes people think that boundaries is a bad thing because you shouldn't have boundaries for other people. And really, it's about keeping your space and time for yourself and for the things that are important to you. And the way that I would think about it is more about intentionality and just being purposeful about the time that you have. Because if you have a purpose, if you have a set time for specific things, then you're much more likely to actually get it done, but feel like you actually were true to your values and your priorities.
I love that. One more piece as you were kind of like talking about it is oftentimes we feel when it comes to boundaries that we don't want to hurt people's feelings. Mm-hmm. But I want you to think about this. When somebody infringes on your boundaries, they try to call you at a time when you're normally doing business or whatever, and you pick up the phone, Think about how you react to them when you feel like they've actually, infringed on your boundaries, right? Sometimes we get resentful or upset or frustrated when if we just hadn't answered the phone, it would have been totally fine. And so when we don't have boundaries, sometimes we can bring that anger, frustration, and resentment into that conversation and into that relationship, and we're actually hurting both them and us. So instead, realizing that boundaries are actually something not just for you, but also for the other person is critical.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I have a question for you. What kind of impact will setting boundaries have on you and others around you?
All right, tactic number 3 is your purpose. I like to think of this as why you do what you do. The truth is that when you're going out to actually hit goals, you're taking action, there's a deep reason why you're doing that. And sometimes we lose focus on that. We get into the day-to-day minutia and we forget about the true purpose and what is driving us to be able to achieve those things. Now, this one is really all about the mindset. And then also the tactics of setting yourself up to remind yourself, right? But some of the questions that I like to ask my clients are, who needs you to be on your A game today? What kind of impact is you showing up despite not feeling it going to have on you, your family, and the world? And then how can you remind yourself daily of what you are fighting for?
So strategy number 4 is to change it up. Really, it's just about trying something different. Like Mark said, we get into the minutia and it just gets really redundant and boring. So changing things up might even spark some creative ideas. You might be more encouraged to learn a new skill or take on a new role. So what is something that you can change up this week?
And also, how would this change affect you and the people that you lead? I find that when I'm bored of things, when I'm not excited about it, it kind of comes through not only through the YouTube channel, but it comes through every area of my life. And when I try something new, I get excited. I notice that other people get excited too. And it's more because of my energy and not theirs. All right, now tactic number 5 is finding social support. These are things like friends, coworkers, family, mentors. A lot of times I find it's actually talking to people who've been through it before because they can actually be there to listen, because sometimes that's all we need is just somebody else to hear what we're going through, hear what we're struggling through, and be on our side. So I have to ask you, what way will you find support this week? How could the fact that you actually reach out and find support not only help you, but the other person that you reach out to as well?
Number 6 may be obvious, but just be proactive. It's really about putting things in place before they happen. One of the biggest things that we always talk to our clients about is asking for help. It just seems like people don't want to ask for help. They don't want to set boundaries and they don't want to ask for help for some reason.
Now, what that can look like is identifying the personal signs that show up when you try to overwork, when you try to go down the path of burnout, and then bringing somebody else on board and allowing them to hold you accountable. Now, this probably isn't just your best support person. It's somebody who's going to be willing to call you out, right? I know for me, Kurt will be like, Mark, I think I saw 72 calls on your schedule this week, and we talked about this, and you didn't want to take on more, right? By the way, appreciate you, Kurt. But in reality, having somebody like that on your team and being able to actually tell them what your signs are, what you typically do in that situation, is going to help you solve that problem in advance. Now, strategy number 7 is seek professional help. This is going to a therapist, a counselor, finding a coach who can specifically help you in this area. And I have to say, for me personally, I've gone through therapy 6 different times, and every time it's helped me come out stronger on the other end. Now, Les Brown has this really powerful quote, and it says, ask for help, not because you are weak, but because you want to remain strong. Now, if you're ready to remain strong, tap the screen to watch this next video where we share 5 powerful questions to keep your fire and motivation hitting on all cylinders. Thank you for being here, and keep leading from the front, leaders.